Booyakash. Boom! That's it! Booyakasha! Kamusta kayo dyan, mga kameta? Yan na. Medyo nakapagpahinga tayo ng konti dun sa mga marathon writings and coverage dyan sa pagbisita ni Marcos Jr. sa the White House, the heart of the Imperium. Yan, mga kameta. Balikan natin ng konti yan. By the way, may update din tayo. Of course, may confirmation na tayo na pupunta si Pangulo Marcos Jr. dyan sa the United Kingdom. Diba? So, shall back to back from the US to the UK. Yan. Para naman mag-attend sa coronation ng... Ayan. Para mag-attend naman dun sa coronation ng bagong hari ng United Kingdom. Inglaterra. Muntik ang mga Estados Unidos. Di kong Estados Unidos, Inglaterra. Yeah. Ayan, sa mga kameta, talagang ibang level talagang president natin na back-to-back talaga. So yan, mga kameta, booyaka siya! That's it. Very busy president, very busy. So in fairness naman dun sa pagbisita ni Marcos Jr. sa United States, medyo mas mahaba siya dun sa 2 days lang binigay sa kanya dun sa state visit. Remember guys, official working visit lang yung kay Marcos Jr. sa White House. Hindi pa siya yung pinakamataas na level ng state visit. Baka later on pa yan. Because kaka-state visit lang ni President Yoon ng South Korea sa White House. So hindi naman pwede back-to-back yan. Medyo bigyan mo ng space yan. But in the meantime, wala pang first year ni Marcos Jr. Ayan, na-arrange na itong official visit. Ang kitang-kita natin na talagang the red carpet was rolled out for him. Talagang respect level, no? Respect level yung nakuha niya, mga kameta doon sa United States. So in fairness, it's something to be happy about that our presidents are getting the due respect and recognition. This is not about being Marcos Jr., it's about being the president of the Philippines, no? At natatawa tayo doon sa mga alam mo na, mga pro-tatay, School of Geopolitics niyan na pinapakita. Nung bumisita si Marcos Jr. sa China, ganitong kadaming tao nag-ano sa kanya. While nung nasa US, konti lang tao. Well, first of all, state visit yung sa China. And second, yung state visit niya, 2 days lang. Ang laki nung contingent ni Marcos Jr., tas 2 days lang binigay sa kanya. At pangatlo, ano man nakuha niya sa China aside from pledges? In fact, not even serious pledges dun sa infrastructure investment. Yung Davao project lang minention dyan, but nothing about Clark, Manila, high-speed railway, nothing about the Mindanao Railway. Wala mga kameta, wala. So, kung titignan mo talaga mga kameta, medyo kulang, no? Medyo hilaw yung pagbisita ni Pangulong Marcos Jr. sa United States. But does that mean that his visit to the United States, sa China, yung bisita niya sa China medyo hilaw, no? We didn't see any major concessions or any kind of major outcomes dun sa kanyang pagbisita. But the question right now mga kameta is, kamusta naman dito sa kanyang pagbisita sa Amerika? Was it as successful as the other side tries to put it, no? So, of course, yung mga critical sa China, sinasabi na, titingnan nyo naman, hindi ganun wala naman masyadong nakuha si Marcos Jr. sa China, aside from, yan na naman, yung mga alam na mga pledges lang, pledges. Pero, ang tanong naman ngayon is, dun naman sa United States, ano naman ang nakuha ni Marcos Jr.? And that's something that we have to really break down. I would say that in many ways, the visit ni Marcos Jr. sa White House was essentially a culmination of a months-long recalibration and realignment between the United States and China, or at least in the Philippine-US-China triangle. There was a major realignment in that. So, kumbaga, na-cement itong realignment dun sa pagbisita niya. So, we clearly see there's a lot of emphasis on defense cooperation, on America's ironclad commitment to the United States, on the parameters of Mutual Defense Treaty. May meeting din si Marcos Jr. with Lloyd Austin, yung head of the U.S. Pentagon, the defense chief of the United States. So, yes, many great things were happening, at least on the surface, as far as the bilateral alliance is concerned. And kung tinignan nyo mga kameta, itong listahan ng mga initiatives na nasign ng both sides dito mga kameta, makita nyo na medyo mahaba-haba, no? So for instance, kung titignan nyo dito mga kameta, ayan, so tingnan nyo yung joint statements at saka yung fact sheet dun sa fact sheet, alright? Didn't sound good. Dun sa pagbisita ni Pangulong Marcos Jr., yung mga initiatives na lumabas dyan, among others. Now, what I want to say here, mga kameta, is this. While we have to give due credit to the realignments that are happening, due credit to the fact that President Marcos Jr. is visiting the US. I mean, under Pangulong Digong, di man lang siya bumisita sa America or any major Western capital kasi lousy daw sila. Sabi ni Tatay Digong. Wala naman siya nakuha dun sa mga kabila. Ano nakuha niya sa Russia? Ano nakuha niya sa China? Hindi yung Pogus ang pinag-usapan. Saan na yung mga Clark High-Speed Railway? Kamusta naman yung Mindanao Railway Project ni Tatay Digong with China? Kamusta naman dyan? Kamusta naman dyan yung mga super high-level defense acquisitions from Russia? Kamusta naman? Now, having questioned the fruitlessness of Duterte's pivot to China and to a certain degree to Russia, or at least the under-actualization of the supposed promise of the Philippines pivot to China and to a certain degree Russia, let's look at naman at the other side. Did Marcos Jr. get a lot out of his pivot naman to the United States? As I said, there are a lot of things to acknowledge and there are a lot of interesting things that are happening between two sides. Of course, yung Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. But let me make, mga kameta, quite an interesting observation which I felt is not as much reflected in a lot of analysis out there. So, because the analysis out there usually ideologically polarized. So, kung galing ka sa China at pro-America ka, sabi mo, napaka-successful na trip. At kung pro-BBM ka, di lalong-lalo mo na exaggerate yan. Kung sa kabila ka naman, di pakita mo na, eto na, Philippines magiging proxy, tuta na America, all of that. And ang Pilipinas maging staging ground for US operations at damay-damay na tayo sa giyera ng China at US, all of that. Both sides are wrong, totally wrong. Because if you look at the agreements between US and the Philippines, and the initiatives that were announced between US and the Philippines after dun sa pagbisita ni Marcos Jr. sa Amerika, may kita mo na on two outstanding issues, medyo kapos din, right? And let me explain that to you guys shortly. So Marcos Jr. and Biden have a lot of shared interest, especially yung kanilang concerns with China. Nevertheless, each of them came into this visit with different kinds of priorities. Para kay Biden, of course, his priority is to enlist the Philippines maximally so that pwedeng maging aliadong Pilipinas to the best level, no? Pagdating dun sa kanilang so-called integrated deterrence, collective deterrence strategy laban sa China, whether on Taiwan issue, whether on the South China Sea issue, among others. But Marcos Jr. came into this with a kind of different priority. Ang priorities ni Marcos Jr. was to make the most out of defense cooperation with the US in order to modernize yung armed force of the Philippines na wala pang minimum credible defense posture or minimum deterrence capability. But pangalawa, and this is where things get very important, Marcos Jr. also went to the United States to really get some update on the status of two important initiatives, a free trade agreement and a regional trade and investment agreement, no? Which we'll discuss shortly. Ang contention po natin is pag na-analyze mo ng mabuti, no? And I've written on this, and I can post to you mga articles, etc. Kung na-analyze mo mabuti, you would see that there's more sizzle than steak, right? There's a lot of superlatives, but I'm not sure the substance was there on some of these outstanding issues. It looks like both sides are still kicking the can down the road. And let me explain that to you guys. What am I trying to say here is this. There's a reason why Marcos Jr. obviously wants us to improve our trade and investment relations with the US because, mga kameta, it's a very under-actualized or it's an untapped strategic economic relationship in many ways. Let me just show you some graphs and figures. So, this is Philippine exports to the US, mga kameta. Tingnan natin yan. This is the Philippine exports to the US. So, 10, 11 billion, bumaba pa sa mga barely 10 billion in 2010. Parang, okay, not bad. Not bad, interesting. Not bad, interesting, right? 11 billion, not a small amount of money. Medyo mas mataas pa kay Villar. 10 billion naman yung net worth. Okay, fantastic. Except, pag kinumpara mo sa mga kapitbahay natin, especially mga, ito pa, yung dating kalaban ng US. Ito yung bansa na kaaway ng US for decades. It was a very brutal war that they waged throughout the 60s and 70s. This is Vietnam. Tignan nyo yung exports ng Vietnam sa US. more or less 10 times larger than the Philippines. I mean, it's insane, right? So actually, I have some of the other numbers here, no? Ang exports ng Vietnam sa US lampas sa $100 billion actually the other year. $100 billion. Habang tayo, 10 to 11 billion dollars lang yung exports natin. In short, pathetic yung export level natin kumpara sa Vietnam. Now, why am I saying Vietnam? Vietnam is not China. It's not a giant country. Its population is slightly smaller than the Philippines. Its GDP is actually smaller than the Philippines. And yet, right, lampas sa $100 billion yung exports ng Vietnam sa US. Philippines is only 10 to 11 billion dollars. Now, it's a very complicated issue, mga kameta. There are many factors that contribute to that. But I just wanted to give it to you in terms of, ito yung mga real talk tayo. Now, I'll show you another important indicators. Let's look at foreign direct investment stock. Let's not talk about Vietnam. Let's talk about Singapore. So, the Philippines and US, when it comes to the FDI stock of US, the maximum number we got here is $10 billion. This is the biggest number I've seen. I've seen numbers that are smaller. I saw numbers that are like 5 or 6 billion lang, right? So makyat siya sa 10 billion 2021. Okay, fantastic. $10 billion in FDI stock from the US. Let me show you the numbers from Singapore. Whoa! The number in Singapore, mga kameta, is not 10 times bigger as in Vietnam. It's more than 20 times bigger, mga kameta. So this is the number on investment between Singapore and US. So in 2020, the number is actually larger later on. The FDI stock of US in Singapore is $270.8 billion. 6 to 10 billion Philippines, $270 billion sa Singapore. Pathetic again yung comparison. The comparison is just pathetic. So compared to our neighbors, again, Singapore's super tiny country. Now, of course, you can say, well, of course, Singapore is an entrepot. Investments go through Singapore. But no problem. I can go to FDI stock in Malaysia. I can go to FDI stock in Vietnam. I can go... The realities, mga kameta, is, let's not apologize for it. Our economic relationship with the US is extremely underdeveloped, right? Pathetic yung export levels natin, FDI levels natin with US compared sa Vietnam. 10 to 1 ratio. Singapore, almost 30 to 1 ratio. I mean, it's not even close. It's not even close, mga kameta. So, ang tanong ngayon is, how can we improve these numbers? Of course, it's a long conversation, but one way to improve these numbers, mga kameta, is to sign a preferential trade agreement with the Americans, a bilateral free trade agreement, right? So that ang America, they will open more their markets to the Philippines, right? A free trade agreement between Philippines. This is an article by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Basahin nyo yourself. You can check it on yourself. So one is a bilateral free trade agreement, and the other one is a broader framework proposed by Biden, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, mga kameta, whereby the U.S. is supposed to further expand its trade and investment relations with countries like the Philippines, but also most other countries in the region, right? So if you look at both of them, mga kameta, tapos natin to, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Doon sa pagbisita ni Marcos Jr., I did not see any serious update on both issues in any serious sense of the word. So I think in the Pacific Economic Framework, it has multiple pillars. It's supposed to, make it easier for U.S. to trade and to invest in strategic countries across the Indo-Pacific region. Let me just show you this. So these are the two ways that Philippines can improve its economic relationship with the United States. One is the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. The other one is a bilateral free trade agreement. Now, mga kameta, tingnan natin na mabuti itong statement na labas dun sa pagbisita ni Marcos sa US. Alright? Look at how vague the joint statement is. Ito. Alright. Basahin natin mga kameta. The leaders welcomed their country's plans to prioritize bilateral economic cooperation through the U.S.-Philippines Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, TIFA. The leaders also applaud progress in developing the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which will deliver concrete benefits to our workers, blah, 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 blah. The two leaders look forward to seeing one another again in San Francisco this November for the APEC Summit to advance sustainable inclusive economic growth, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Just to give you an idea, mga kameta, itong bilateral free trade agreement with the U.S., Matagal na pinag-usapan yan. Nakailan administration na tayo. Hanggang ngayon, there's nothing concrete being offered by the US. Makameta on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, but in fairness naman, it was just announced the other year. But it's so vague. Where's the substance? We really don't know. It's just a framework. We don't know what it's all about. It's not even a digital free trade agreement. It's not a concrete infrastructure investment agreement like the Belt and Road Initiative of China. So the problem we have, mga kameta, here is, ano ang mga konkretong mga na-offer ng America in order to push a bilateral agreement forward in order to enhance yung ating economic relationship? So, ito, again, I showed you the numbers here, mga kameta. Tignan nyo again, FDI numbers natin, it's a ratio of 30-1 with Singapore. Exports natin to the US, it's a ratio of 10-1 with Vietnam. So, it doesn't make sense. I mean, of course, sabihin natin, mas develop ang Singapore or Vietnam in terms of manufacturing, in terms of, okay, gets ko na yan. But it's just 30-1, 10-1. Obviously, something is not working here. And obviously, we have to improve that. So Marcos Jr. had the reason to emphasize the importance of trade and investment in bilateral relations because it's a very underdeveloped relationship. In fact, as President Marcos said last year, shortly after winning the presidency, we want trade, not aid, when dealing with the US, and then he announced that we will be part of the Indo-Pacific Economic Forward. Okay? So this is very important, mga kameta. This is very important. It's not as discussed as much. We talk about EDCA, but we're not talking about as much, mga kameta, about economic trade and investment relations. Yung isang troll dyan sa YouTube, balikan kita, mabablock kita, walang yaka, umayos ka. Ayaw mo maging syunga-syunga, makinig ka dito, baka matuto ka sa buhay. Okay, balikan natin yan. Hindi, kailangan natin to put this... Okay, mamaya natin balikan yung mga unggoy na yan. Ito mga kameta, ito. So ito yung sinabi ni Pangulong Marcos Jr. No? He made it very, very clear. By the way, I was referring to the trolls kanina. Yan ang kasi problema mga kameta eh. Yung iba dyan, gusto lang nila trashy vloggers at kolokohan. They don't wanna learn eh. They don't wanna improve. Kaya hanggang dyan lang sila forever. Now mga kameta, ito so sinabi ni Pangulong Marcos Jr., we want more trade, not aid. And he's absolutely correct about that. We need more trade and investment ties with the US. And saan naman tayo kukuha ng investments for infrastructure, etc. Lalong-lalo na kung lalala yung relasyon natin sa China dahil sa itong issue ng EDCA. Like, good luck getting all of those investment pledges from China, lalong-lalo na ngayon na lumalapit pa tayo sa US. Si Duterte nga, hindi niya nakuha after everything. Na lumalayo pa sa US. Na ngayon na lumalapit tayo sa US, what are the chances that that $20 billion or so that was offered to Marcos will come into fruition, right? So yun yung isang outstanding issue that I didn't see any clear breakthrough on. For Biden naman, I think, he can be happy about the result, but it's not like also the US is getting everything that it wants after this. I think the US clearly wants to have maximum access possible under EDCA. And yet, kung titignan mo ang Pilipinas, ang position ni Marcos Jr. is to ensure na hindi tayo maging masyadong depende sa US or that the EDCA will not end up serving as America's outpost for conducting military operations against China down the road. As he made it very clear, Philippines should not be a staging post for foreign powers. Sinabi na yan the other week, just days before meeting Biden. Earlier also, he made it very clear that he doesn't want EDCA, or really make sure that EDCA will not be a basis for offensive military operations against China. So clearly, there's a hesitancy on the part of President Marcos Jr. Now, may mga bakahenyo dyan na mas marami alam sa atin, but as far as I know, mga kameta, as far as we know, mga kameta, President Marcos Jr. is going for what I call a Goldilocks EDCA, whereby there's just enough number of cooperation with U.S. and American presence in the Philippines to help us to expedite the modernization of the AFP, but not too much na ma-provoke ang China. At dahil dyan, medyo hindi pa rin finalize yung EDCA. So, as far as I know, hindi pa rin clear how many troops can enter the EDCA sites, what kind of weapon systems will be there, artillery, Patriot missiles, what kind of aircrafts. Now, even if that has somehow been agreed upon following the Marcos Lloyd Austin visit, the reality is that EDCA is also very flexible by nature, and there's nothing that the US can do, at least legally speaking, without getting the Philippines approval. So we can constantly tweak and twist and dribble itong EDCA na ito to make it perfect for our national interest. But the thing is, the US wants a bit more than that. The US wants the maximal access so that they can store all the weapon system in order to be able to properly respond to any kind of contingency over Taiwan, etc. So doon mukhang hindi pa rin nagtutugma yung position ng dalawang panig. So on those two outstanding issues, mga kameta, it's very clear that there was not a breakthrough during the visit. Now, just to be realistic, of course, we're not expecting this breakthrough to happen right away. It might take some time, and it's a good thing. But down the road, honestly, my question is Biden or whoever is the next US government really in a position to offer us a big trading investment agreement? Not very sure about that. We can have a different discussion about Made in America, onshoring, and protectionism in America. The other thing that we have to talk about, mga kameta, is will Marcos ever be willing to give maximal access to Americans under EDCA in ways that will compromise his outreach and his communications channels with China? I also have doubts about that, mga kameta. So for me, this is a serious deadlock that is not being discussed as much. So yes, relations are improving far better than the Duterte years, especially the early Duterte years. But nevertheless, there's still some major issues that have not been resolved. Kaya sabi ko, more sizzle than steak. Alright? Okay, are there any questions there, mga kameta? Tingnan natin kung may mga tanong kayo dyan. Again, you're not gonna get this analysis in the normal headlines you're gonna see. All the headlines about oh, big thing here, big thing there, blah, blah, blah. But actually, mga kameta, kung tinignan mo, kung nag-analyze ka na mabuti, kasi tayo, mga kameta, I'm already doing a paper on IPEF, I'm been analyzing the bilateral relationship, I have to write on this, I'm looking all of the details, mga kameta, the background, the foreground, the prognostications, the long-term trend lines. Medyo hilaw din tong isip na to. So, hindi rin siya masyadong successful perhaps in certain ways, but good enough in terms of at least putting the alliance on an even keel, as supporters could say. Anyway, in the meantime, siguro naman, dun na tayo sa King Charles. Tignan naman tayo. Ito talaga, timing talaga ni Marcos Jr. Kung kailan siya naging presidente, may bagong coronation in the United Kingdom. Mga kameta. Social. So baka, I think nandun na rin si Biden at saka other leaders. So President Marcos Jr. from the United States to the United Kingdom. Yan. Pag-usapan natin yan. By the way, live i-breakdown ko rin yung coronation on a TV channel, not dito, but we'll have a live about this. Pag-usapan din natin yan. Medyo interested din ako dun sa British politics. No, I'm not a fan of monarchies, especially in the 21st century, but it's an interesting thing, mga kameta. Pag-usapan natin yan. Anyway, speaking of which, sige bukas na lang. Hindi, sige ngayon na lang. Dito, kanina si Teddy Locsin, may hanas siya eh. Na hindi naman, may mga bisita-bisita na yan, importante naman, may ganun. Okay, share ko na lang mamaya na tayo mag-ano. Let's be kind, let's be nice. Alright, mga kameta, kamusta kayo dyan? Are there any questions, mga kameta? And again, mga kameta, everything I showed you here, I showed you graphs, I showed you data, I showed you analysis, I showed you quotations. Lahat yan, facts-based. This is how we do analysis, mga kameta. Hindi katulad yung mga, direct ganyan, ex-blogger, Malacanang, ganyan, trashy bloggers, ganyan. Hindi ganyan, hindi marites. Ito talaga, based on facts, graphs, data. Doon sa mga YouTube natin, pasensya na kung hindi nyo makita dito, don't worry, i-upload ko yan shortly para makita nyo yung graphs and data. But at least, meron kayong ganitong analysis and all. Alright? Thank you very much, mga kameta. Really, really pleasure always talking to you guys. Salamat kay Cass, Claire. My question siya. Meron siya, what if China just decides to bombard China? You mean Philippines targeted? No, I don't think about done. But ang question here, mga kameta, is if China does other things like trade sanctions, cyber attacks, etc., ano yung mga reaction? Yun ang medyo talagang tignan natin dapat, no? Thank you also dun sa mga nag-comment dito. May nag-question ba? Prof, may question ako. Do you feel mas rarami pa ang... Hindi mo naman tinapos, Crisostomo, yung mas marami ang naglalag ba to? Ayusin natin. Baka naglalag yung internet ko. Hindi ko nakita. Parang hindi kompleto yung question. Pakikompleto yung tanong po. Anyway, salamat din dun sa iba. Just your average Joe. Conception Johansson. Please answer. Huwag na natin patulan yung mga expert dyan. Yung mga iba, alam mo, kung claim mo maging expert sa IR, huwag na tayo pumunta dyan. Basta, looking forward dun sa iba na mag-publish muna sila ng any serious scholarly work. Kamusta yung Google Scholar nila? Mm, right. Anyway, anyways mga kameta, yun nga sabi ko both camps mali eh. Yung camps na super anti-US, yung camp din ng pro-US, mali pareho. Mali pa sila pareho. Dapat tignan mo talaga yung mga detalye. That's where the real thing is. Oh, ito tanong ni Ika. Do you feel na mas marami pa ang... wala eh. Talagang hindi kompleto yung tanong eh. Hindi, Chris, Joe Bear, tinanong niya about BPO. Yun nga, much of the US investment talaga sa Philippines, mga services, mga BPO, ganun. Wala masyado dun sa manufacturing, etc. Like, di ba, dati sa Santa Rosa, meron tayong Ford, assembly line at least, semi-production. Parang nawala rin yun, di ba? So, kapos talaga. So, yung mga exports natin, mga 10-11 billion lang sa US, yung Vietnam, 100 plus billion. Yung FDI sa atin, mga 10 billion lang maximum. 6 billion pa nga yung isang year lang eh. Sa Singapore, 300 billion, right? I mean, this is ridiculous. It's not even comparable. So, we have to make the more out of this. So, tama naman si BBM na sinasabi niya, trade investment should be priority. At tignan natin ang talagang ma-offer ng US sa Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Otherwise, wala nga edka na lang tayo. Wala yan. Kulang yan. Tapos gusto pa nila na maximal EDCA. Kaya sabi ko, dapat President Marcos goes for a Goldilocks EDCA. Right? While negotiating for better market access, better weapon system, etc. At by the way, wala akong nakita mga kameta na any update dun sa whether bibigyan tayo ng mga advanced weaponry ng US. I'm not talking about that whatever plane or some old ships they're thinking of giving us. I'm talking about F-16 V-block fighters. I'm talking about Harpoon missile systems, HIMARS, who knows, maybe Patriot missile system. Wala eh mga kameta. Medyo hapyaw din eh. But anyways, this is just first year of Bongbong. Let's see what else is there. But we don't know if Biden is still the president after a year or two, right? May election na sila next year, di ba? Baka ibang manalo, baka iba na naman ng drama. But I think in general, the Philippines is in a good position to make the most out of its relationship with the US in the sense that in the US, both Republicans and Democrats recognize na mahalaga ang Pilipinas. Pero it's one thing for them to recognize mahalaga tayo. It's another thing for us to make sure that will be translated into some big concessions for us. Trade investment front, but also in terms of military modernization. At so far, I don't see any concrete indications. $100 million for military financing, ano yun? Makakabili ka lang yata ng isang aeroplano dyan na matino eh. Diba? Wala. Kulang pa. So, para sa akin, mali parehong side. Yung pro-US antis, para sila mali. Shallow silang pareho. Shallow yung analysis nila. They don't really dig in properly. Ito. Si Crisostomo, sabi niya, bully ang ganito. No. I don't think why one trip ma-deter ang China. Obviously, na-worry yung China. Pero for me, the challenge for China is, ano naman i-offer nila sa Pilipinas para hindi naman tayo mag all the way dun sa US. Siyempre, dapat balancing yan. But, US and China are not the same to us. One is a treaty ally, one is a rival in the West Philippine Sea, or some would say worse, right? But nonetheless, we have to have the best possible relationship with both sides under current circumstances. Not imaginary circumstances, but current circumstances. Thank you very much mga kameta. Ito na, habol na ako dun sa ating mga admin work and all. Thank you so much. Habol natin dun discussion na to. I really felt kailangan natin pag-usapan ng mabuti ito. Kasi kung binasa nyo lang mga headlines mga kameta, kung binasa nyo lang yung mga, kung ano na makahanasyan ng mga vloggers or mga pundits, shallow lahat ng analysis eh. Hindi kasi ito mga yun, hindi kasi sila nagsusulat. Hindi sila nagsusulat ng real academic articles, hindi sila nagsusulat ng real academic books. They don't even write consistently for top publications on the latest visits and all. Yung iba, walang choice. You really have to research properly kasi trabaho mo na mag-analyze at the highest possible level, mga kameta, di ba? At alam niyo mga kameta, interview din tayo right and left. 7 a.m., BBC, ganitong oras, Deutsche Welle, itong oras, ganito. Bukod ba dun sa mga local? So, parati tayo under pressure to get all the angles of the issue. So, hindi natin sinasabi na super galing tayo. No, it's just that because of the nature of yung commitments natin, kailangan talaga namin malaman ng masinsinan. Talagang pagsusuriin yung mga agreements, etc. So, yun lang. Alright? Thank you very much, guys. Pag-usapan natin soon pagbisita ni Marcos Jr. the United Kingdom. Booyaka siya! Pag-usapan din natin yung kaalagaan ng Estados Unidos. Ay, hindi. Ang Inglaterra sa Pilipinas. Yan. Ganyan tayo para tayo mga hip-hoppers na. Alright, mga kameta. Thank you very much and talk to you soon. Ay, wait, bakit sabi ni Mia Fresi, pre-loved weapons. O hindi naman mga 70s Vietnam War era yung mga weapons na binibigay sa atin. Medyo mas next level, medyo Michael Jackson era, medyo yung ano. Pero sana naman, medyo pang kay Justin Bieber time. Wag naman sana Westlife time yung mga weapons na binibigay sa atin para may pag-asa naman tayo kahit papaano, di ba? Alright! Thank you very much, mga Meta. Talk to you soon. Have a good night and God bless.